Hey guys, it's Britt, and welcome to part 2 of this discussion episode of Game of Thrones. So we are talking about Season 1, Episode 4, Lord Snow. And rather than break down everything, because this video will go on forever if I do, I have decided that I'm gonna just kind of play it by ear and see how it goes. So the episode starts out with my favorite, Theon. But in all seriousness, this is the introduction to a very, very important character whose name is Hodor. And Hodor is this I believe he's half giant, technically, or else he's just a very, very tall man. And Hodor helps Bran. Hodor is large, but also very strong, and so he can carry the now crippled Bran. And what's interesting about this episode is that Tyrion Lannister has fulfilled his promise to Jon and has stopped in Winterfell. But he hasn't just stopped to relay Jon's message, but he has actually offered Bran a gift. And that is a special saddle. The design that Tyrion uses could be modified for Bran's use, and Bran loves horses. He loves riding. That probably had a lot to do with why he was so depressed, the poor kid. He thought that his life was over. He even said, "I would rather be dead," to Robb in the previous episode. And I think Tyrion kind of gave him a little bit of hope and motivation. Of course, Robb thinks that Tyrion has an ulterior motive. But Tyrion's just doing it because Tyrion isn't like the rest of his family, and he's a genuinely good man. He just wants to help out Bran. Back at the wall, Jon isn't struggling as much, but another character we get introduced to is Sam, or Samwell Tarly. Sam is from House Tarly, and if you watch the episode, you kind of know a little bit of Sam's backstory. Like I said, he is of House Tarly, and his father deemed him unworthy of being the heir to his household, so he gave him the option of going to the wall or being killed in the woods. And of course, Sam chose the wall. And Sam and Jon are kind of starting to form this friendship, much to the dismay of Alistair Thorne. Yeah. He obviously does not... This guy has it out for Jon. He thinks that Jon basically just got to where he is because of who his father is. And I would argue that that isn't the case at all. In fact, Jon is trying to help his fellow brothers, and his fellow brothers include Sam. And since Sam is a little overweight, he's very prone to getting bullied by the other members of the Night's Watch. We see our friend Littlefinger again in King's Landing talking to Ned, and Littlefinger essentially says, Ned kind of says, "Maybe I was wrong to distrust you," and Littlefinger says something to the effect of, that not trusting me was the smartest thing you've done since you stepped off your horse. So that says a lot about Littlefinger, doesn't it? Or Peter Baelish. And just a lot happens in this episode that you really need to pay attention to if you're a first-time watcher, and everything is gonna click together eventually without giving away spoilers. I think a lot of you are going to realize that George R. R. Martin is a master at foreshadowing. Arya continues her dancing lessons, or her sword lessons, and she's getting along really, really well, and she admires Syria a lot. She's constantly quoting him, and Ned kind of makes a little joke about this, and how much she quotes, "Oh, Syria says this, Syria says that," and Ned's a good guy. I like Ned. He's got a good head on his shoulders, and he's a good dad. He wants the best for everything, but he's also researching something, and he already suspects that the Lannisters have something to do with the death of Jon Arryn, and so he's investigating that. And Cersei isn't liking that too much, but he comes across a blacksmith and a blacksmith's apprentice. This is the introduction of a character named Gendry. Now we will see Gendry again, and Ned puts 2 and 2 together. Robert is known for not really sleeping with Cersei, and instead choosing to sleep with other women. So Robert may have fathered a few children that are not Joffrey, Myrcella, or Tommen. Are you kind of putting pieces together? Because Ned has started to. What was it that was said? The seed is strong. Let's remember that quote. What's really important to note about Gendry is that Gendry has King Robert's coloring. Take a look at all of the Baratheon children. Do any of them look like Robert to you? Let that sink in for a second. And let's see, what else can we discuss? Sansa is still hurt about the death of Lady, and the tourney. The scene where Robert is watching the jousting, it's a pretty graphic scene, and I don't think Sansa was expecting something like that. And keep in mind, she's not used to these things. She's not used to King's Landing. She spent her whole entire life in Winterfell, and while she is of noble birth, I would argue that the Starks have lived a pretty moderate lifestyle, like a pretty humble, not moderate, a pretty humble lifestyle. They may live in a castle, and they may host those noble birth, but Ned has not allowed them to live in the extravagance that the Lannisters have lived in. Whether that is because the Lannisters have more wealth than the Starks, or it's just not in Ned's nature to spoil his children, which I think both are contributing factors. Sansa's not used to this. She's not used to blood. She never went to a beheading. She's a lady. She has never seen or bore witness to a beheading, by her father. So I think the tourney was a shock to her. Just an innocent little jousting match resulted in a man's death. And it was a pretty shocking, pretty horrendous way to go, in my opinion. A shard wood to the throat just killed you. And I happened to be eating Doritos during that scene. I don't recommend that you do that. I thought that scene was in a completely different episode. I believe we get introduced to another important character, though it's very brief in this episode, and that is Sir Loris of House Tyrell. And the Tyrells are another noble family that will become very, very important. And let's see, Sam. Oh, we should talk about John. John refusing to sleep with Ross, one of the whores, despite her being. She says, John says, "Oh, she was very, very pretty, but I couldn't bring myself to do it," and because he didn't want to father another bastard, he didn't want to risk putting another child through what he went through. And I think that's an important thing to know about John. John knows his place in the world, and it frustrates John, mostly because Ned never talks about his mother. And we see a bit more of Daenerys. She gets very aggressive with her brother, but who can blame her? Viseron. What you have to understand about the Targaryen bloodline is that the Targaryens, in order to keep the bloodline pure, they've been marrying brothers and sisters for generations. And as a result, the Targaryens are not known to be the most mentally sound people because of generations and generations and generations of incest, and that really shines through with Viserys. And when Daenerys tries to give him a clothing item, he lashes out and gets mad and says, "Oh, you've woken the dragon." Daenerys, for the very first time, fights back, and it's a power play, and it's definitely gonna be interesting in the next episode. So I think that's all I want to cover for this episode. If you guys want to talk more or have any questions, as always, please put them in the comments below. And guys, if you are caught up with the series and want to discuss it in the comments section, please warn people of spoilers. Alright guys, I love you, and I'll see you in the next video.